Hi, I'm Michelle from Paper Blooms. It's time to get started making your very first paper flower. And where better place to start than where I started, with a peony. In an earlier video I talked about the very first paper flower that I made, which was paper peony, and I even have a photo of it as well, which looks completely different to this one right here. I'll pop a link at the top of the screen so you can go back and watch that if you haven't already. The very first paper peony I made, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I think I watched one or two YouTube tutorials and then I just winged it. And it turned out alright considering. But since those days I have perfected peonies. They're the flower I still love to make over and over again, and every single one looks different. And you can see there's a lot more detail in this than in my earlier ones. I didn't really have much of a tutorial to work from, so I'm hoping this 3-part series will help you to make an even better first peony than mine was. So first of all, you need to make sure you have all of your tools ready. First up, you're going to need some crepe paper. You'll want one colour for the main petals and a green colour for the calyxes and the leaves. So choose something that complements one another. You'll also need one piece of wire. This is a 16 gauge wire and it's 18 inches long. You actually don't need it as long as this if you want a shorter stem. I'm probably going to cut mine to about half, but you definitely want something thick like a 16 gauge. You want a pair of detail scissors and you want some household pliers. You also want some floral wire in a similar coloured green to match the colour of your paper. And then also you'll need some glue. I would recommend the Alien's tacky glue. If not, you can use a hot glue gun, but I will be using this one. So if you want to follow along, get yourself some tacky glue. And I recommend decanting it into a little plastic pot with a cocktail stick as well. I do have another video where I go into more detail about materials, which I will link up above here for you. I'll also pop links in the description box below to all of the materials that I'm using today. And as well as that, I've also created a free template which you can download to help you cut your petal shapes. That's in the description box below, or you can go to tarmuchlypaperblooms.com to download that now. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so first you need to take your wire and using your pliers, cut it down to the length that you want your finished bloom to be. Next you'll cut the paper for your fringe. So I'm taking a strip of crepe paper that is about 14 inches wide here, folding it over 4 times, and then I'm cutting a strip which is about 2–2.5 inches. You don't have to be exact with this, it depends how fluffy you want your peony to be. And then we're going to take that strip of crepe paper and stretch it all the way out. So just take it between your 2 thumbs and then pull until it won't go any further. When you get to the ends, there'll be a few pieces that haven't quite stretched, but you can just cut those off. Then you just want to fold your crepe paper over. Here I'm folding it into 4 and then again in half, so into 8, but it really depends how you prefer to work. And then I'm going to start to cut the fringes from this as well. I have a whole video that goes into more detail about how to do the fluffy centres, so if you haven't seen that, go and watch that first. That'll give you a lot more tips and techniques that you can use when you're creating your fringes. And then when that's done, I just unfold the strip of crepe paper, and then I'm going to go along and check for any pieces that are a bit too wide and then trim those down to be smaller. And then the next stage is to go in and twist all of the individual fringes. So you can do this however you prefer to work. If you find it easier, you can use small sections or even individual pieces. But personally, I find it a lot easier and quicker to do a section at a time. So you'll see here I'm grabbing quite a few pieces and twisting them into one another, which really does help to speed things up. And then once I've done the first strip, I like to go in and do the second one at the same time. I just find it easier to do things in batches just to make the whole process of making your flower a lot quicker. Once my fringes are finished, then I'm going to cover the end of the wire with some crepe paper. That just helps to hide the green so that you don't see it at all. So I'm just going to stretch out a small piece of crepe paper and cut that down into a small square. And then I'm just going to cover that in some tacky glue. Just spread that out onto the paper and then just fold that over and wrap it around the wire. Again, that technique is covered in the fluffy centres video, so if you need a little bit more help, go and watch that as well. Next, I'm going to add glue to all of my fringing. So you can see here I'm just dabbing a small amount all the way along the bottom edge. So I'm adding glue to both sections at the same time, and that's because this glue works best when it's a little bit tacky. So this just gives it a chance for the air to get to it and to make it stick better once I add it to the bloom. So now I'm just going to attach that onto the stem. So I want the top of the wire with the paper covering to line up with the bottom of the cuts in my fringe. And then with one hand I'm going to roll the wire, and with the other hand I'm going to stretch that paper as much as I can so that it goes on tight. As I'm adding it on, I'm just pressing down onto the bottom of the fringe just to make sure it's all stuck. And you can also work with different lengths of crepe paper if you prefer. So you'll see I cut a smaller section just to wrap that on. When you're getting started, it might be easier to do small pieces and then work up to the big ones. So once your fringe is done, you want to put that to one side to let it dry. And while that dries, you can be cutting out your petals. So make sure to download the template from below the video. I'm going to be doing these freehand, but you can just cut around the template just to make sure you get the right shape. You'll see there's some lines within the crepe paper, and you want to make sure they're running top to bottom when you're cutting your petals so that you can easily stretch them out. Once you've got your petals cut out, now you want to cup them to give them the shape so that they wrap around the centre of the flower. So to do this, you need to stretch it between your two thumbs, and then you want to curl it as you go. It's quite difficult to explain, so I'm going to show you a few examples. So you start with your both thumbs together in the centre of the petal, and then almost push down and then pull out at the same time. So you can see here I have my thumbs in the middle and then I'm pulling out at the sides. And that just gives it the nice rounded shape. So you can get faster as you do these, but take your time with the first few. So I've included two options within the template. There's the basic curved petal, and then there's these heart-shaped ones as well. I would highly recommend you do as many of the heart-shaped ones as you feel comfortable doing to start with, because they really make a difference to making your flower look more realistic. So initially I didn't bother, I just did the curved ones, but then now I tend to do almost all in this heart-shaped petal. So the technique to do these is exactly the same. You just want to start at the very top of the heart shape and gently curl out the top piece before you move on to the rest of the petal. They are a little bit more tricky to do and they can tear a little bit easier, but I honestly think they are worth a little bit of extra effort just to add more detail to your flower. But if you don't feel comfortable with that straight away, just start with the simple ones and maybe add in one or two of the heart shapes. Once you start stretching your paper, sometimes you get little nicks that need just trimming off, or sometimes the shape isn't quite right. All you have to do is go back in with your scissors and just round those off. Now that you've curled all your petals, you just want to add some glue to the bottom section. So I'm using a cocktail stick here so I can easily spread it out. And I'm probably putting glue on about the bottom third, maybe quarter of the petal. You really don't need a lot of glue, and you don't want to put too much on because you'll overload the petal. And then when you try to stick it onto the flower, it's just going to slide around and it won't stay in place. And again, I'm working in batches to make sure that my glue goes tacky before I stick it onto the flower. And now for the tricky part. So we're going to stick our petals onto the flower now. So you want to line up the first one. So initially line up the bottom of the petal with the bottom of the fringe, and hopefully that should be in about the right place. You can move it around if not. You just want the top of the petal to slightly overlap the top of the fringe. So first of all, you want to add in about thirds. So put your first one on and then rotate it, and then add one about a third of the way round, and then do the same with your third petal. So you're going to end up with 3 approximately equally spaced petals, but it doesn't have to be exact at all. It's important that you focus on filling in the gaps rather than trying to make your flower symmetrical. So you'll see here there's 3 gaps between the petals which are formed. So I just want to go back in with my next petals and overlap those. So you can see there that starts to overlap, but I've put it on too high, so I'm just going to slide it down a little bit and then reposition. Make sure you look from the top of the flower so you can make sure it's in the right position before you then stick it on fully. That's the beauty of working with a tacky glue rather than a hot glue gun, because you can easily reposition them until you're happy with them. And just make sure you constantly go back and check from the top of the flower to make sure it's looking right, because actually you're not going to view it from the bottom generally anyway. And then once it's in place, just need to squeeze the bottom of the flower just to make sure it sticks properly. And then I just continue to work my way around, sticking the petals in any areas that have got gaps and making sure that they slightly overlap the top of the fringe. Ideally you want them to start to curl over the top of the fringe as well, if you can make it do that. So you can see that certain parts of the flower are looking a bit sparse, so I'm just going to focus on those areas and make sure that I'm positioning my flowers just to fill in those gaps. And then I'm just going to continue to add the petals and make sure they're fully stuck at the base of the flower. Okay, so that's it for part 1 of the tutorial. We'll continue with part 2 tomorrow, where we'll finish adding the petals. And then in part 3, I'll show you how to finish your peony and how to make some leaves to go with it too. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss when part 2 goes live. And please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you have any questions about part 1 of this tutorial, then let me know in the comments box below. Hope to see you back here soon. Tell Much Tea for being here to celebrate life's special moments with me.